Stop scrolling. Seriously, pause right now. Because what you're about to experience is not passive content, it's a direct test of your internal stability. Not your motivation, not your dreams, not your goals, but your actual ability to remain present under pressure. Most people believe they want change. They say they want money, love, confidence, success, peace. But the truth is, almost no one can hold the internal state required to sustain those outcomes. They collapse back into distraction, doubt, or unconscious habits within seconds. This challenge is designed to expose that. In the next 90 seconds, you're not going to visualize your dream life. You're not going to repeat affirmations. You're not going to try to manifest anything. You are going to do something much harder. You're going to hold a frequency, a stable, coherent identity state without breaking. And here's the part most people don't realize. Your reality doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you consistently are. If your nervous system cannot sustain the identity of the person who already has what you desire, your environment will never reorganize to match it. That's why most people fail, not because manifestation isn't real, but because their internal state is unstable. They fluctuate, they react, they escape, they distract, they break presence. And every time they do, they reinforce the same identity they're trying to escape. So this is your moment. For the next 90 seconds, you will face your own mind. You will feel the urge to move, to think, to check something, to drift away. And if you break, even once, you reset. Because this is not about comfort. This is about control. This is about coherence. This is about proving to yourself that you can hold a state without collapsing. Only 1% of people can do this. The question is, are you one of them, or are you still operating on autopilot like everyone else? Before we begin, do something simple but powerful. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and drop a comment below telling me which part of the United States you're watching from. I want to see where the most aligned individuals are tuning in from. And when you complete the challenge, if you complete it, come back and comment, "ALIGEND." That word is not just a comment, it's a declaration. It's a signal to your subconscious that something has shifted. Now understand this clearly. This is not meditation. Meditation allows you to drift. This does not. This is a controlled identity stabilization exercise. It is rooted in how your brain and nervous system process attention, emotion, and self-perception. Your brain is constantly predicting your reality based on your past patterns. This is called predictive coding. It filters your environment to confirm the identity you've been rehearsing unconsciously. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, your brain will literally ignore opportunities that contradict that identity. If you see yourself as someone who is confident and successful, your perception reorganizes to support that. But here's the problem. Most people try to think their way into a new identity while their nervous system is still wired for the old one. That creates internal conflict, and conflict breaks coherence. Coherence is when your thoughts, emotions, and physiological state are aligned. When this happens, your brain shifts into a more efficient processing mode. Your heart rate stabilizes, your breathing becomes rhythmic, your attention sharpens, and most importantly, your sense of self becomes consistent. This consistency is what allows new patterns to form. Without it, nothing sticks. You can repeat affirmations all day, visualize all night, but if your internal state is unstable, your identity remains unchanged. This is why the 90-second threshold matters. Neuroscience shows that emotional and cognitive patterns often operate in short loops. If you can interrupt a loop and maintain a new state for around 90 seconds without reverting, you begin to weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. But it's not just about time. It's about quality of presence. If you're physically still but mentally scattered, you haven't stabilized anything. You're just pretending. So what you're about to do is simple in structure, but extremely difficult in execution. You will sit or stand completely still. You will keep your eyes focused or gently closed. You will bring your awareness to the present moment. Not the past, not the future, not your goals, not your problems. Just now. And you will hold that awareness without reacting to anything that arises. Thoughts will come. Sensations will appear. Emotions may surface. Your job is not to suppress them or engage with them. Your job is to observe without moving, without labeling, without following. This is what is known as the observer state. It's the point where you are aware of your experience without being controlled by it. Most people rarely access this state because they are constantly identified with their thoughts and emotions. They believe every thought is true. They react to every feeling as if it defines them. But in reality, thoughts and emotions are just signals. They are outputs of your nervous system based on past conditioning. They are not your identity unless you choose to identify with them. When you enter the observer state, you create distance between you and those signals. And in that space, something powerful happens. You gain choice. Instead of reacting automatically, you can decide how to respond. And that decision point is where identity change begins. But here's where it gets challenging. Your brain does not like this. It is designed to conserve energy and maintain familiar patterns. When you try to break those patterns, it will resist. It will generate thoughts to pull you out of the present moment. It will create discomfort in your body. It will try to convince you that this is pointless, boring, or unnecessary. That's not a failure, that's the test. Every urge to move, every distracting thought, every moment of discomfort is an opportunity to strengthen your control. When you resist the urge to react, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are teaching your nervous system that it doesn't need to default to old patterns. And with repetition, this new stability becomes your baseline. Think about it like this. If your identity is a frequency, most people are constantly switching channels. One moment they feel confident, the next they feel insecure. One moment they believe in themselves, the next they doubt everything. This inconsistency creates noise, and noise prevents clear signals from forming. But when you stabilize your frequency, when you hold a consistent internal state, you reduce that noise. Your signal becomes clear. And that clarity is what allows your actions and decisions to align with your desired outcomes. This is why manifestation is not about attracting things. It's about becoming the version of yourself that naturally produces those results. When your identity is stable, your behavior changes automatically. You make different choices. You take different actions. You respond differently to challenges. And over time, those changes compound into a completely different reality. But again, none of that happens if you can't hold the state. And that's why this 90-second challenge is so important. It's not about the duration. It's about proving to yourself that you can maintain control over your attention and your reactions. Because if you can't do that for 90 seconds, you can't expect to do it for days, weeks, or months. So as you prepare to begin, understand that this is a training ground. It's a controlled environment where you can practice stability without external pressure. But the real goal is to take this skill into your daily life. When something triggers you, can you stay present instead of reacting? When you feel doubt, can you observe it without letting it control your behavior? When you face uncertainty, can you maintain your state instead of collapsing into fear? These are the moments that define your identity. Not the big decisions, not the major events, but the small, repeated choices to stay aligned or fall back into old patterns. And the more you choose alignment, the stronger that identity becomes. So right now, take a deep breath. Not to relax, but to center yourself. Feel your body. Notice your surroundings. Bring your attention fully into this moment, because in a few seconds the challenge begins. And once it starts, there is no halfway. You either hold the state, or you don't. And remember, this is not about being perfect, it's about being aware. If you notice yourself drifting, that awareness is your opportunity to return. But the goal is to minimize those breaks, to extend your stability, to prove to yourself that you are not controlled by your impulses. Because at the end of the day, your external reality is just a reflection of your internal stability. If you are consistent inside, your life becomes consistent outside. If you are scattered inside, your results will reflect that. So the question is no longer what you want. The question is, who are you when nothing is distracting you? Who are you when you're not reacting? Who are you when you're fully present? That's what this challenge is about, and that's what we're about to find out. Now that you've been introduced to the challenge and the concept of identity stability, we need to go deeper into what actually happens inside you during those 90 seconds, because this is where most people misunderstand the entire process. They think the difficulty comes from trying to stay focused, but that's not the real challenge. The real challenge is that you are interrupting a system that has been running automatically for years. Your brain and nervous system are not neutral. They are patterned. Every thought you think, every emotional reaction you have, every behavior you repeat is part of a loop that has been reinforced over time. These loops are efficient. They are predictable. And most importantly, they are comfortable for your brain, even if they produce results you don't want. So when you sit down and attempt to hold a stable, present state, you are not just being still, you are actively disrupting those loops, and disruption creates resistance. That resistance is not random, it is structured. It follows patterns. The first pattern you will notice is cognitive drift. This is when your mind starts generating thoughts that pull you away from the present moment. It might remind you of something you need to do, something you forgot, something you're worried about, or even something completely irrelevant. These thoughts are not appearing because they are important. They are appearing because your brain is trying to re-engage its default mode network, the system responsible for mind, wandering, and self-referential thinking. This network is active most of the time in most people. It is what keeps you identified with your thoughts. When you enter the observer state, you are essentially quieting this network, and it does not like that, so it increases activity in an attempt to pull you back. The second pattern is physiological discomfort. You might feel an urge to move, an itch, tension in your body, restlessness, or even a subtle sense of anxiety. This is your nervous system reacting to the lack of stimulation and the interruption of habitual movement and reaction. Your body is used to constant micro-adjustments, constant engagement with the environment. When you stop that, it creates a kind of withdrawal effect. Your system is saying, something is different, return to normal. But what it defines as normal is not necessarily optimal, it's just familiar. The third pattern is emotional surfacing. This is where things get more interesting. When you remove distractions and stop reacting, suppressed or background emotions can start to rise. This could be boredom, frustration, irritation, or even deeper feelings like sadness or unease. These emotions are not being created by the exercise. They were already there. They were just being covered by constant activity and distraction. When you enter stillness, you remove the cover, and now you are face to face with what's underneath. This is why most people fail. Not because they lack discipline, but because they are not used to facing their internal state without escape. They have trained themselves to avoid discomfort at all costs. If they feel bored, they check their phone. If they feel anxious, they distract themselves. If they feel uncertain, they seek external validation. These behaviors are so automatic that they don't even realize they're doing them. And every time they escape, they reinforce the pattern. They teach their brain that discomfort must be avoided. So when they try to hold a stable state, the moment discomfort appears, the system triggers an escape response. But here's the key insight. Discomfort is not the problem. Reaction is the problem. Discomfort is just a signal. It is your nervous system adjusting to a new condition. If you can remain present without reacting, that discomfort begins to lose its power. It peaks and then it fades, and in that process you are teaching your system a new rule. You do not need to escape to be safe. This is where the concept of nervous system regulation becomes critical. Regulation is not about feeling good all the time. It's about maintaining stability regardless of what you feel. A regulated system can experience discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. It can process emotions without being controlled by them. And most importantly, it can remain present under pressure. The 90-second challenge is essentially a micro-training session for regulation. It compresses the experience into a short window, but the principles apply to every moment of your life. When something triggers you, your ability to stay present instead of reacting determines the outcome. If you react automatically, you reinforce the old pattern. If you remain present, you create space for a new response. Now let's talk about identity, because this is the foundation of everything. Identity is not just a label you give yourself. It is a network of beliefs, memories, emotions, and behaviors that create a consistent sense of who you are. This network is self-reinforcing. Your beliefs influence your thoughts influence your emotions influence your actions, and your actions produce results that confirm your beliefs. It's a closed loop. Most people try to change their results by changing their actions. They push themselves to do more, to try harder, to stay motivated. But if their underlying identity remains the same, those changes are temporary. Eventually they revert back to their baseline. That's why people start strong and then lose momentum. They are operating against their own identity. Real change happens when you shift the identity itself. But you cannot force an identity shift through willpower alone. You have to create conditions where a new identity can stabilize. And that's what this practice is doing. By holding a consistent internal state, you are creating a stable platform for a new identity to emerge. Think of identity like a signal in a noisy environment. If the signal is weak and inconsistent, it gets lost in the noise. But if the signal is strong and stable, it becomes dominant. Your brain starts to prioritize it. Your perception begins to align with it. Your behavior follows it, and over time it becomes your new normal. This is also where the concept of the observer effect comes into play. In simple terms, the act of observation changes the system being observed. When you become aware of your thoughts and emotions without identifying with them, you alter their influence. You are no longer reinforcing them automatically. You are interrupting the loop. For example, if a thought arises like, "I'm not good enough," and you immediately believe it, you strengthen that pattern. But if you observe it as just a thought, something that appears and disappears, you weaken its hold. You create separation between you and the thought. And in that separation, you gain control. The observer state is not passive. It is highly active in a different way. It requires attention, awareness, and control. It is the opposite of autopilot. And the more you practice it, the more accessible it becomes. Now let's address something important. Why 1%? Why do so few people succeed at this? The answer is not because it's impossible. It's because it requires a level of honesty and discipline that most people avoid. It forces you to confront your lack of control. It shows you exactly how quickly your mind drifts, how easily you react, how dependent you are on distraction. And that can be uncomfortable to see. Most people would rather stay in the illusion of control than face the reality of their patterns. They would rather consume more content, look for new techniques, chase new ideas, instead of mastering the basics of presence and stability. But without that foundation, nothing else works. So if you're still here, if you're still engaged, that already sets you apart, because you're willing to look at this directly. You're willing to test yourself instead of just thinking about it. As you move forward into the actual execution of this challenge, I want you to shift your mindset. Don't approach this as something you're trying to get through. Approach it as something you're studying. You are observing your own system in real time. You are noticing how your mind behaves, how your body reacts, how your attention shifts. Every moment is data. If you fail, and at some point you probably will, that's not a problem. Failure is feedback. It shows you where your instability is. It shows you what triggers your reactions. And once you see that clearly, you can work on it. But the goal is not to fail. The goal is to extend your stability, to hold the state a little longer each time, to reduce the frequency of breaks, to increase your control over your attention. Because ultimately, this is what determines everything else. Your ability to control your attention determines what you focus on. What you focus on determines what you think about. What you think about influences how you feel. How you feel influences how you act, and how you act determines your results. So this is not a small skill. This is the core skill. This is the foundation of everything you're trying to achieve. And as you continue, remember this: your external reality is not something you chase. It is something that reflects you. If you change your internal stability, your external experience will follow. Not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. Because your actions, your decisions, your interactions will all shift in alignment with your new state. So take another moment now. Check in with yourself. Notice your breathing. Notice your posture. Notice your level of presence. Because in the next phase, you're not just preparing. You're stepping into the actual test. And this time, you're not going in blind. You understand what's happening. You understand why it's difficult. And most importantly, you understand that every moment of resistance is an opportunity to strengthen your control. This is where the real work begins. Now, this is where everything comes together, and where most people either step into a new level of control or fall back into the same unconscious loop they've been living in. Because the truth is, this was never about the 90 seconds. The 90 seconds was just the mirror. It showed you exactly where you stand with your attention, your reactions, and your identity stability. It exposed whether you are directing your mind or whether your mind is directing you. And that awareness, if you're honest about it, is more valuable than any technique you could ever learn. If you completed the full 90 seconds without breaking, no drifting, no reacting, no escaping, then something important just happened. You proved to yourself that you can hold a coherent internal state, that you are not bound to every thought or impulse that arises, that you have the ability to remain present under pressure. And that is the foundation of identity transformation, because once you can hold a state on command, you can begin to choose who you are, instead of repeating who you've been. But if you didn't complete it, if your mind wandered, if your body reacted, if you felt the urge to escape and followed it, then this is where most people make a mistake. They judge themselves. They think they failed. They assume they're not disciplined enough, not focused enough, not capable. And that interpretation becomes another pattern that reinforces their current identity. But that's not what this is. What you experienced was visibility. You saw the exact mechanisms that have been running your behavior. You saw how quickly your attention shifts, how strong your impulses are, how automatic your reactions can be. And now that you've seen it, you have something you didn't have before, awareness. And awareness is the first break in the loop, because you cannot change what you cannot see. Now you know where the instability is. Now you know what needs to be trained. And that means you're no longer operating blindly. This is where repetition becomes powerful. Not repetition of content, but repetition of state. Every time you return to this challenge, you are strengthening a different version of yourself. You are training your nervous system to tolerate stillness, to remain present, to resist the urge to escape. And slowly that ability starts to transfer into your everyday life. You pause before reacting. You notice thoughts without immediately believing them. You feel emotions without being controlled by them. And those small shifts begin to compound. Because identity is not changed in a single moment. It is stabilized through consistency, through repeated exposure to a new way of being until it becomes familiar, until it becomes natural, until it becomes you. And this is one of the simplest, most direct ways to train that. So as you leave this experience, don't treat it like something you tried once. Treat it like a tool, something you come back to, something you use to recalibrate when you feel scattered, when you feel reactive, when you feel out of alignment. Because every time you return, you are reinforcing the same message to your system. You are in control, not your impulses. And over time, that message becomes your baseline. So if you reach the end of this, go ahead and do what you committed to at the beginning. Drop a comment and write "Elegant," not for me, but for you. As a marker, as a decision, as a point where you chose to step out of autopilot, even if just for a moment. And if you're serious about changing your internal state, about upgrading your identity, about creating a reality that reflects stability instead of chaos, then make sure you're subscribed, because this is not a one-time experience. This is a process. And the more you engage with it, the more you'll start to notice the difference. Not just in how you feel, but in how you think, how you act, and what you allow into your life. Your external world will always mirror your internal consistency, not your intentions, not your temporary motivation, your consistency. So the real question isn't whether you want change. The question is whether you're willing to become stable enough to sustain it. Come back to this whenever you're ready to test yourself again.